Welcome to the MATC seminar. As you know, we have a lot of partners in Mid-America Transportation Center from across our region. I'm particularly excited to have the Medical Center participate. This is the first time we've had, as the Region 7 UTC, have medical centers participate. What you're going to find is that the medical centers see safety that we are very concerned about as an issue of public health, and they do take a much different view on how to approach it, and it really makes our consortium stronger. So we're happy to have folks from the University of Kansas Medical Center with us today. And they're going to be talking about some of the work they're doing with commercial drivers. So with that, I'm proud to introduce one of our colleagues, Shelley. She's going to be talking today about some of the work they're doing down in Kansas City. So
Awesome.
Thank you.
Thanks, Larry. Appreciate it. Thank you. Thanks for having us. We just drove in 5 minutes ago from Kansas City. And it's a beautiful city. It's a beautiful day. So thanks for having us. And we invite you all to come to Kansas City and visit our Med Center also. Volume-wise, am I okay as far as transmission? Microphone, great. Awesome. Okay. So yes, the title of our study is called Assessing and Improving the Cognitive and Visual Driving Fitness of CDL Drivers. I wanted to introduce our team before we go into the study. So I am Shelley Bhattacharya. I am a physician at the Medical Center specializing in geriatrics. And that was what really got me interested, was older drivers, how we can help improve the safety of older drivers. It's one of my passions, you can say. Dr. Akinwuntan is right here. He is actually the Dean of the School of Health Professions for the University of Kansas Medical Center. So he oversees all the physical therapy, occupational therapy, speech-language pathology, a lot of the allied health professions that also help to improve the safety of drivers. So that was a great collaboration that we have. Dr. Devos is not able to be here today. He is the co-investigator of the study. He's also in the School of Health Professions, and he helps with the simulator portion of this study that you'll hear about soon. We have our coordinator, who is Iarina, who is right here. So she helps with the scheduling of drivers that come through for the study. She helps with coordinating the medical students that work with us. So she's awesome. And then speaking of medical students, we have 2 medical students that are involved in this study. We have a second year, the M2, and a first year, M1, that are both involved in this study. So they're here for the long haul in trucking term. For about a 2 to 3 year commitment is what they've committed so far. So they're great to have on the team. So that is what our team consists of. So as we all know, driving is a very dynamic task, right? It involves cognitive and visual skills to perform safely. It's especially important when it comes to commercial vehicles. And that's where we really had an interest in this study, working with Larry. So driving commercial vehicles, especially those that are loaded with hazardous materials, requires even more planning and consideration for changes on the roadways, whether it's weather changes, whether it's road changes, talk about speeding, slushing, liquid surge, sharp braking, braking speed, braking distance, all of that comes into a higher consideration when it comes to larger vehicles and commercial cars, commercial trucks. So such planning and consideration are highly dependent on cognitive and visual skills for accuracy and thus safety. So one of the cardinal missions of the Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration, the FMCSA, is to improve safety on our nation's highways. That includes reducing the number of accidents that involve commercial truck drivers, including hazardous and non-hazardous material transportation. These accidents have a high potential to cause serious harm to the public and to the environment. So we at KU Med want to help this mission. And so what we are doing, we're looking at the cognitive and visual fitness and also rehabilitating pertinent components of drivers who drive commercial vehicles and ultimately improving their driving fitness. We are developing a sensitive measure of cognitive and visual alertness that indicates cognitive overload, which results in an accident. And we're also designing an alert system to notify EMS, local to wherever the accident is, and notify them of where accidents are happening to prepare them for incoming patients when it comes to accidents happening, and notifying local opposing control, for example, if something is happening. So brief literature review, there are approximately 1.7 million long-haul truck drivers in the United States, either for hire or in private fleets. Truck driving is the second most common occupation here in this country, employing 1 in 35 adult men. Commercial motor vehicle drivers make up a substantial proportion of the workforce, but there will be a shortage in the coming years. People are living longer. People are choosing not to do the trucking. It's a tough lifestyle. It's a tough lifestyle, not just for families, but also personal lifestyles, as far as exercise, as far as diet. It's not easy. So fewer and fewer people are choosing the trucking profession for them. And then people are living longer, so they might be ending their trucking career prematurely, not trucking, not going out to their 65, 75, 80 years old. So we wanted to see, how can we help them drive for longer? What are some things that we can capture to help drivers drive longer in a safe manner? And safety is a big deal, right? So this is the purpose, these are the purposes of our study. We want to assess their cognitive and visual fitness. We want to identify the top 5 tests. So we have a battery of about 120 data points that we're capturing for each subject. And we're also capturing their on-the-road driving performance. So we want to see, do any of those 120 data points correlate with on-the-road driving safety for CDL drivers? And then we can provide that data for providers that are doing their DOT physicals and tell them these 5 tests are what predict on-the-road performance for CDL drivers. So it would have impact not just locally here in the Midwest, but also nationally when they're testing their CDL, because they have to go in for annual physicals. It's a full 1-hour exam. It's pretty extensive for sleep apnea, for example, laboratory testing, history, physicals. But if they know that these 5 or 6 tests correlate the best with on-the-road safety, we're helping them out. And then look at the effect of an intervention program to improve whatever deficits they have. So since we're with the School of Health Professions, we can look at, are there any range of motion problems? Are they missing their blind spots? Are they having problems with attention? Is there anything that we can rehabilitate to help them with those deficits? He has OT, like I said earlier. OT does those driving assessments for regular passenger drivers like you and I. So she's working with us too to see how can we improve whatever domain they're lacking in to help them be better drivers. So is that an effective intervention program? So like I mentioned earlier, we hope this study will be helpful in identifying CDL drivers who have cognitive and/or visual impairments that may make driving a commercial vehicle, including those that carrying hazardous. So we have oil rigs that come through, like is Quick Trip here? Quick Trip gas stations? No, yes.
A different one.
A different one, okay. So whatever gas stations you have here. So petroleum carriers, oil carriers, anything that's carrying hazardous materials. It'll be helpful for identifying any unsafe measures in those drivers. And then we're going to be offering rehabilitation for those deficits that we're seeing. And then by identifying the top testable predictors of on-the-road driving safety of CDL drivers, medical providers who perform the DOT annual physicals will benefit on a national scale. So that's where this study has power, has significance. It meets MATC's research goal to make fundamental advancements in basic and theoretical research related to improving the safety of the US and Region 7 transportation systems. A key focus is to ensure that the results from this study will be implemented by medical providers taking care of CDL drivers and regional and national transportation agencies. So how are we doing all this? What is our plan? So all assessments take place in one day. So we recruit drivers to come in. They come into KU Medical Center in Kansas City, and we tell them it's not like they have to come in 2 days in a row or 3 days in a row, because they're busy folks. They can't do that. So they come in, it's a 2-hour assessment. We tell them no more than 2 hours. Ideally less, maybe an hour and a half. It depends on how quickly they're answering the questions and how quickly we are too as the assessment team, right? But 2 hours is what they do. Remember I told you 120 data points? So that has been picked from a literature review. So we looked at what's been done in the past to look for driving safety in private drivers, individual drivers. And they found that. They have found identifiable domains that do predict on-the-road safety, but it has not been done for commercial drivers. So I want you to know that what we picked was based on the literature as far as looking at other drivers who are non-commercial drivers. And we have that data for all drivers, private drivers, and also drivers for over age 65. Total duration, including consent, takes 2 hours. We asked them to come once a year for 3 years to follow them through. We asked them to share their e-log data with us. Are you all familiar with that? It's basically an electronic log of their hour by hour, minute by minute log of what they're doing are they taking a rest break for 30 minutes? Are they driving for 8 hours straight? Where have they stopped for their rest stops? Are they taking their mandatory break after X number of hours of driving? So it's done electronically. It used to be on pen and paper, and they found it was probably not reliable or not often done. So now it's all electronic. It's within their probably GPS system as far as what's being done to the minute so that they're compliant with federal regulations. So when they come to us, we ask them if they could share that data with us. We don't require it because we could eliminate a bunch of drivers, and we don't want to make them feel awkward in sharing their e-log data. We do have them do a self-assessment on how their driving has been. Have they had any near misses? Have they had any accidents? What kind of accidents have they had? How do they feel their driving is doing? Are they driving too fast or too slow during certain times? Do they feel like they're fatigued? Is their attention limited in certain ways? So we have self-assessment questionnaires, and we ask them for their e-log data also. We are very clear with every subject that no one apart from us and the driver gets these results. And that took us 1 year to, Larry knows, 1 year to iron out, because KU, this is a lot. If we find someone who is unsafe to drive their CDL truck, does KU then have the liability? What if they have an accident the day after their testing? Are we now liable? So it took a year to decide that no, since we are wearing our research hats, we are not liable for injuries or accidents that happen after this data is known by our team, because this is for research purposes. And the subjects are clearly told that this is not shared by their employer. It's not shared with the DOT. It's only shared with them and with us. And that's it. And it's interesting, like when we asked Walmart, for example, corporate Walmart, who you've seen trucks everywhere, they wanted their drivers to be involved only if they could get the data. Walmart wanted to know how their employees' drivers were doing, and if they should focus on safety measures for their drivers. And we thought long and hard. We meet every month to go over everything for our study, and we decided, no, we're not going to share that data. That could definitely bias who we get and also the answers that we get, right? So we told Walmart no, and we lost them. They're like, we're not going to do this until we know the results of your subjects. So that was interesting. We didn't think they would want that, but they did. And so, but we make it very clear to the subjects that no one else is notified. And that's important. That was very important. We were able to get additional funding of $50 per visit by KUMC Research Institute. So they provided funding for $50 per visit, which was a big deal. Because before that, we weren't getting anybody to come in, to be honest, so this gives an incentive. And even $50 is not a lot of money. Like when we go to truck stops, you see that poster behind you, that's what we have at truck stops. at gas stations where truckers come through.
Yes.
And they're like, $50 is not why we would do this. We would do this for the industry. You know, it's not, the money means they're like, you know, this one guy's like, I'm 23 years old and in 1 week I made $8,000 or $10,000. I mean, he had, and I worked 60 hours per week and I made $10,000. And he's like, that's not bad for someone who's 23 years old. I'm like, yeah, that's not bad for someone who's 23 years old. You know, he's like, $50 is nothing, but if this is going to help our industry be safer, I'll do it. You know, so we give them $50 per visit, meaning if they come 3 times, they get all $150. If they come once, they get $50. So it's not like they only get it after the end of 3 years. The medical students, we have trained them to be the active assessors of their assessment. Our goal is to get 85 subjects, 85 drivers. We collect their demographic and clinical information. We do all those things that you see up there, and some of which you may or may not be familiar with. So this is our overall protocol. You'll see it goes through basically the first 4 years of the 5-year grant. So we do the initial cognitive visual mobility, what we call CVM testing. They either pass or they fail that. And how do you pass or fail? So each one of those 120 tests, so some are just demography information. You can't pass or fail that, right? But the testing has pass or fail criteria. So we assign them points based on how well they do on the testing that I'm going to show you. And based on that, we'll determine if we've determined a cutoff for passing or failing based on how they do on the individual tests. So you'll see TEPR is called Task Evoked Pupillary Response. Dr. Akinwuntan will talk more about the TEPR training. So they'll get additional training depending on how they do. Year 3, you'll see what happens. They get annual testing, they get TEPR training. There's an alert system that comes up in year 4. And finally, we do our write-ups and finish up whatever, you know, tie up the loose ends during year 5. This is our cognitive assessment. Does it sound familiar to any of you? These titles of tests? Not really, no.
No, they're not.
Okay. So the stroke driver screening assessment is an interesting, and I brought pictures so that you guys can kind of see if you can do it yourselves, if you get tested on these measures. So those are the instructions, and a lorry is, so it came from Europe. So lorry is a truck, just in case you weren't sure. So they're given cards. It turns out there are actually 4 tests for this assessment. We've chosen 3 of the 4 tests for this study. This is one of them. This is called the Square Metrics Direction Test. You give them the first example, and the instructions you can read up there. So each car, you want to put that in the direction of the small arrow, and you want to put each truck in the direction of the large arrow. So you see there are small arrows and large arrows, right? So you position your cards so that it's matching those directions. Each card has a set of a car and a truck. Does that make sense? So you give them an example of the first one, and then you give them the 15 remaining cards, and they put those on the appropriate squares. Each correct square is worth 2 points for a maximum of 32 points. Then it becomes a bit more complicated. This is called a compass test. So those are the directions. And basically, they are now given 32 cards to match 16 squares. And they have to match, they have to match the x-axis with the y-axis on each of these cards here. Does that make sense? So you have to know where the positions are. Like you see, this is facing north, this is kind of facing south, west, southwest. So you have to put the appropriate 16 cards in the right spots. Each one is worth 2 points. Here you do an example first, and you have the subject do the remaining. This is the road sign test. So this road sign test, you are given 21 cards to put in 12 squares. You do not give them an example ahead of time on this grid. You give them an example on a separate grid, on a simpler grid, showing them what to do. So you give them road signs and they have to put which road sign should go in each of these geometric shapes, the circles or the triangles. So you're asking them to put in those road signs. Each correct answer here is worth 1 point for a maximum of 12 points for this one. So they require some complex thinking, executive function, is what we talk about. So not easy. This is our Keystone Vision Screener, which we use for the visual assessment to assess visual acuity, depth perception, visual field, all the things you see up there. Also not easy. We've all done this ourselves. So from personal experience, it's not easy. It's not like your driver's license renewal where you can just detect colors or something. So it's different. Okay, this is the Mocha. And here's an example of the test. This is an example of a Trails B. You're matching number to letter to number to letter to number to letter. You're drawing a clock, another executive function test. Driving is an executive function for our brains. Going through steps methodically, not making mistakes. That's what drawing a clock does. The time is 10 past 11, strategically chosen because they're in two different quadrants of a clock when you're drawing it out. And believe me, I've seen some crazy, crazy clocks. Like the numbers are outside of the circle. The numbers are all on one quadrant, like 1 through 12 are on one quadrant of the clock. Like, yeah, they should not be driving. So, naming animals you see here, we have a 5-item recall. Tapping your hand whenever you're hearing the letter A. Serial 7 subtraction starting from 100 and how many they're getting correct. Telling them about fluency or speaking about fluency, having them repeat complicated sentences. Finding matching themes when you're talking about matching words. Your delayed recall here, did you remember these words up here? And then orientation is the final item. So it's out of 30 points. You can see normal is a 26 out of 30. So if you missed 4 today, it's okay. 20 to 25, you have mild, what we say mild dementia if you're having problems with a function. 10 to 19 is moderate, and then 0 to 9 is considered severe. So this is the Mocha. And this is the Trails Part A. You're just matching 1 to 2 to 3 to 4. And then here's the Trails Part B we had earlier, 1 to A. So if they failed that Mocha test, you can have them do a big Part B here, Trails Part B. This has been found to be predictive for passenger vehicles. We just don't know about commercial vehicles, which is why we included this. Motor assessment, range of motion, and gait speed. And then we'll talk about the driving simulator.
Thank you. Okay, can you hear me? Okay, so good. Okay, so this is the driving simulator part of it. So what we have is an STI Sim model 500 simulator. And we use the 3-screen format that would give you an average viewing angle of about 135 degrees. It's a simple cabin cockpit module that the subjects can easily go in and come off. The simulator assessment typically takes about 20 to 30 minutes. And basically what we have done, these are the simulator program is about 13.5 miles long. It drives through a quiet city setting, roads that would not allow you to do more than 45 miles per hour. And then it gradually revs up in complexity to more active traffic and with obstacles sometimes crossing the road. And after that, it goes on to highway drive, which then becomes 60, 70 miles per hour and on 2 sides of the lane. And it has a lot of navigating curved roads and seeing how well people navigate curves. Then it goes on to back into a city setting but under a different atmosphere. And these are the times when you have really crazy drivers coming directly opposite you and it's looking at what would you do? Or you're passing by two cars that are parked by the roadside and one of them just shoots in front of you and goes on. And then it ends up back in a really cognitive area where the posted speed, you have to use your judgment. You know, like when you have all these exit ramps on interstates and you were coming on like 70 and then the exit ramp suddenly drops to 30 or 40 miles per hour, but very few people do 30 or 40. You probably always enter the exit with like 65, and then you realize it's difficult to control the steering, and then you start to step on the brake pedals. All of those we test. Then, so basically it's a drive in a daily life traffic situation while obeying all traffic rules. That's a very important feature of it because the program is specifically simulated to make you pay for every single mistake you make during driving. So you find a lot of subjects saying, that's not going to happen in real life. It's like, this is a simulated test. It is just to help us understand, are you one of the good drivers out there? So a good example is if you're on the interstate, the simple law is you stay right except when overtaken, right? If you overtake, well, and then it says you look in your mirror, if there is a car already executing the maneuver, you let them complete theirs before you go in. So it's a system where if you pull into the overtaking lane without looking in your mirror, there's a car always there coming and it would crash into you. And you'd be like, well, even if I did that in real life, it won't crash into me. Say, yeah, but this is a test. So that's an example. We don't have to wait until it happens before you do it. Then, if you actually successfully did your overtaking maneuver but refuse to go back to your right lane, then another car comes and crashes into you. So, because at the end of the day, what you get is the data that gives us all the mistakes you performed. And your performance algorithm is based on number of mistakes and severity of the mistake. Okay? And then, of course, we do the brake response time. And so most of the situations are cognitively demanding and either low cognitive demand or high cognitive demand. And the reason for that is then we're able to correlate the off-road test finding, most of the tests that are cognitive, and see if the same cognitive deficits that they exhibited during the off-road testing actually transferred to real driving. Or on the other hand, if in spite of the deficits they showed on the off-road testing, they know what their problems are and have developed the most effective compensatory method not to show up during real driving. Okay, so the other thing we do that is good with this is we do a pupillary recording, and you're going to see it when I talk of the a TPR, pupillary recording, and basically I'll explain that to you as we get there. But we use an eye tracker, which is a FOVIO eye tracker over there, and it's mounted in front of the simulator, and it basically calibrates itself to the pupil on both eyes, and then it helps you look, it helps us see what were you looking at different times. But more importantly, since we're dealing more with cognitive issues, the pupillary size has also been correlated as the size of cognitive workload. So if you have more workload, or as the workload changes, as the cognitive demand changes, the pupillary size changes at the same rate. So, and it gives us the estimate of attention. Okay, so for the brake response time, basically what happens is this is just a regular drive on the city, and red stop signs just pops up in the middle of the screen. And you're supposed to come to a screeching halt as fast as possible. And you just look at the response time. Now, this is one of our best predictors because we have normative data for all age groups, all right? And we have matched it, and it just shows that once you're outside of the margin, which is usually 0.4 seconds, if you're outside of that, if you're outside of that margin, 4 seconds, not 0.4, 4 seconds. If you're outside of that margin, it's a real issue with safety. Okay, so the driving simulator tests, again, the protocol we use is based on several studies that we have done. The subject is first given a familiarization task with which they get used to how the simulator works. If they say they are okay, then they get to do the full driving test. Okay, so the task evoked pupillary response is like this. When there is, so we talk of cognitive reserve. Basically, if a healthy person and a person with a medical problem or cognitive issues are given the same task, of the cognitive reserve, which is your cognitive capacity, that person, the healthy person will probably use maybe 10, 20% of that capacity, whereas the person who has a medical issue would almost use up all their cognitive reserve. Now, they may still both be able to complete the task, but the effort it required for each person may be different. What that means is, if you have a lot of cognitive reserve here, you're able to perform several multitasks. Whereas if you know that you're challenged like this person, then you would stay more with unilateral tasks, right? Unimodal tasks. But again, driving at different times will require your multitasking capabilities, all right? And so that's why we look at cognitive workload. And so basically, you can see the pupillary size there. When you do a 4-digit recall, a 5-digit recall, 6-digit recall, what you see is greater pupillary dilation with increased difficulty. And that's what the eye tracker does. So basically, we're able to look at the different scenarios and see where the subjects had more pupillary dilation. And if it's a known high cognitive area, then maybe it's a good response. But if it's a low cognitive area, then there is an issue. And typically what it means is, if you notice, truck drivers don't tend to have much trouble within the city and where there are a lot of activities going on. They tend to have more trouble on lonely, single lane roads where there are very few things requiring their cognitive demand. So the indication of that is if the pupillary size is growing in a low cognitive demand area, the simple implication is they're giving less and less attention. They're getting tired, exhausted, one thing or the other. It is time to start pulling over. So one of the things we will do in the later part of the study is that alert mechanism. At what point is this pupillary dilation large enough to trigger a warning system of, hey, you need to pull over, you need to stop, which is all about the safety of hazmat materials.
Okay, so we're going to talk about recruitment. They talked a lot about the methods and everything we did. So now I'm going to try and show you how we are trying to get all these truck drivers in, right? So first, we have these materials. You created a flyer and a pamphlet, and then you also have a web page. If you want to, I think it's a hyperlink. If you want to click on it,
you can just take one of each.
So this is our study. We're trying to recruit and see if there are some patients that come at KUMC and they would be interested in participating. So yeah, if you want more information, you can go down. Yeah, you can scroll down. We've given them a a small description of the study and what they should do and the compensation of the big things. Yeah. And then they have our contact information in case they're interested, my email address and my office phone number. Yeah, I think you can go back. Thank you. Okay. So we have several resources. We actually began recruiting in the fall of 2018. As Dr. Bhattacharya said, we had some issues with the legal clearance. So that took us nearly a year. Then we wanted to go in and look into our internal KUMC database. And I'm going to talk further about it. And then we tried to contact international and national transportation companies and then national and local supermarkets. Again, as Dr. Bhattacharya talked about Walmart. In the end, they didn't want to collaborate with us. So then also we've tried to contact national and local truck companies and also truck stops, again, as we mentioned before. Those are some of the content companies we've been trying to reach. It's a bit difficult to get people to collaborate with us. So yeah, as you can see, we tried local and state companies like the Highway Patrol, the Motor Carriers Association, the Owner Operator Independent Drivers Association, the DOT, even the Town and Country Disposal. They were only receptive. So we were a bit disappointed in that for sure. So anyways, yeah. And then several gas stations like Quick Trip and Casey's. And also we tried to talk to FedEx and Amazon, even UPS. But yeah, we weren't really successful in that. Then this is the internal KUMC database I was talking about. It was actually, I think at this point was the most helpful of all. So it's Huron State stands for Healthcare Enterprise Repository for Ontological Narration. It's a whole description. I'm not gonna tell you that. I mean, you don't need to know all of this. It's just a little bit of an introduction. I think it's important to say that that does not include any identifying information, such as a medical record number, name, address, or birth date. In an effort to further de-identify the data, we shift dates to a random date within 365 days prior to the actual date, and the same random time shift is applied to all events for that patient. So it's a huge database. So we use a query, a truck driver and bus driver. We got a list of 96 potential participants, but we couldn't guarantee, that there would be a bus driver. It can be a random something that came up in their history or in the description. Then there's a research rule, let's say, where you can contact them for maximum 3 times, try and talk to them. Then we ended up scheduling 11 participants, but yeah, unfortunately, we only have 4 completed to date. And there were 4 more interested, but not scheduled yet. Then we have 45 that were not interested or didn't qualify, even though maybe they were interested, but we couldn't include them in our study. 22 couldn't be reached. And we have like a sample email we sent to 14 potential participants. And then we ended up collaborating with the Durham Buses. As I said, we are also interested in bus drivers, so that was pretty helpful. Then we also were able to collaborate with Price Chopper and KMed West, again, a part of KMed. So yeah, these are our biggest collaborations at this point. So we actually just had a meeting last week with the KMed people. They conduct the majority of the DOT physicals for 6 commercial companies with the CDL drivers. We met with the administrator, a physician, and the lead clinic staff. Then they plan to integrate recruitment with their electronic medical record system. It's a process, so we are working on that. We hope to get there soon. Then again, the last few weeks, we've been trying to go to truck stops and try to recruit, which is not easy. So we ended up going with the 3 of us because we saw that if only one of us goes, the truck drivers are not really receptive, and I think they feel like, I don't know, maybe harassed or something. So if you are 2 or 3 of us, it's easier. So, oh yeah, this is the e-log that Dr. Bhattacharya was talking about. We took a picture of that. We found that in the, it was just for sale in a regular gas station. So yeah, we just tried to drive around Kansas City and find the biggest truck stops. So these are 2 Love Travel Stops and Travel Center. Here is us. You can tell the huge poster, which actually was, I mean, it was helpful. Then, so yeah, we tried to lure them in, I guess. But
We thought they would love the donuts.
I know, she was so convinced. She was so proud of herself.
I know, but they really they're like, I have diabetes,
Yeah, I know.
I'm on a diet. I'm
Yes.
like, really?
So anyway, but they were actually really open to talking about it. At some point, we had drivers coming to us. Okay, we heard you guys want to talk to us, so that was nice. Yeah, they were. I mean, we were gonna for sure do that. I think it was the most helpful recruitment resource at this point. So yeah, we have now a list of 20 interested active CDL drivers that we're calling now. So see what, if maybe 25%, 30%, if we get that percentage in, then we're going to be happy, because you never know, right? I mean, they might say yes, and then the day after, like, oh, maybe not. Or yeah, you never know. So anyways, let's see. And then the conclusion of the study, that's what we want, right? To help detecting testing parameters to predict CDL on the road driving performance. And then we have it's quite a lot, right? A huge database, that's for sure. 110 parameters will be tested on 85 subjects. Recruitment is still there. We are working on it. I think we're getting there. At some point, we were a bit stressed about it, but now we're back in the game, so that's good. So yeah, we just hope to help CDL drivers drive longer and safer with all of this. So that's our I think goal in the end. It's just hard to convince them, I guess. So yeah, these are our references. And then thank you for your attention and for having us here. Thank you. And yeah, do you have any questions?
That's great. Thank you.